Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, likewise.
Yes, sir. Very interesting things have been happening lately. Well, honestly, very interesting things happen all the time now, especially moving closer to 2025. Trump wins. Now we have drones popping up out of nowhere in New Jersey. FBI don't know what it is. Homeland Security don't know what it is. And then we have a CEO for a major company gets shot in New York City. And the sympathy is not for the CEO. The sympathy is for the perpetrator. What is happening?
So I can speak to a couple of those areas from experience, not with necessarily respect to the drones, but, the drones, I'm not sure the FBI and or the government authorities don't know what's happening with respect to those. One thing that's certainly true with respect to drones is there are more and more of these just public individuals that have some of these types of things, and drones are available and you can buy them. And I don't know what the size of all these drones are. Some people may be mistaking some things for airplanes, thinking they're drones. When there's an article in the newspaper that, I don't know if you ever remember, there was I think this was in the 30s, there was a radio broadcast of a kind of like a radio show, and it was called like War of the Worlds, I think it was. And many people listening to this radio show at the time didn't realize that it was actually a show. And the person that was narrating the radio show was making it sound like it was a news bulletin that Martians were invading the United States, and was giving these detailed descriptions. The Martians are en route to New York City. They're making progress. The authorities are stopping. And some people actually believed that. Most people probably didn't, but there's some people that actually believed what was being presented in the radio broadcast. The point being that there's all these news stories suggesting there's drones all over the place and things like that. Sometimes there are going to be some people that are going to say, that airplane is a drone. Now, that being the case, reading some articles on the subject and just using my common sense, and I do know some people that have a military background, that are in the military with a pretty significant rank, there probably is some type of classified government project going on, and for some reason they don't want to tell people about these things.
There's been cases where government will run these type of projects and just won't inform the community, so to speak.
Right.
I know a lot of the private jets that they will fly, fighter jets they would fly back in the day, people thought that they were aliens.
Right.
But come to find out, no, they were like
now the modern warfare, particularly with the Ukraine war, has changed dramatically, and many people maybe aren't fully attuned to this, but it relates back to drones. In that conflict with Ukraine and Russia, both sides are using many, many military drones. And there are these unmanned, robotic aircraft they can sometimes have bombs attached to them or missiles, and they're flying over enemy territory and actually attacking targets and things like that. So that technology, so we think sometimes of the battlefield of, there's going to be a tank firing a weapon and a guy shooting a machine gun. That still is there.
Correct.
But you also have these advanced weaponry things that kind of become like the new technology of warfare. So maybe these drones are something related to that in testing. maybe they aren't.
So you don't think it's Russia or China?
Well, I don't know. It could be also because, or there could be multiple answers. There could be a classified project. There could be some things with some other power. I mean, the Biden administration has, in my view, very mistakenly taken the Ukraine-Russia conflict and made that put that in terms of a risk of maybe it becoming escalating into something larger. They gave authority to the Ukrainians to use U.S. missiles to attack deep inside Russia.
Yeah.
They gave authority to the Ukrainians to actually invade part of Russia. And one of the differences today that didn't exist, say, 30 years ago is, unfortunately, the United States doesn't either have the technological edge over these foreign powers, or the edge is very it's very minor. And I think in some cases, countries like Russia and China may have more of a technological edge militarily. So that's another reason why do we really want, we shouldn't want this Ukraine-Russia war to continue. It's draining our resources. There's the risk that it could become bigger, and it's not really accomplishing anything. Many people are dying, and the Russia and China are becoming more aligned than ever before. There's the movement with the BRICS countries to undermine the U.S. currency. So we, whether some of these are, it wouldn't surprise me if some of these were Russia or Chinese technology, just saying, okay, if you're going to be a little more aggressive with us, well, let's maybe just, float a few drones and see where maybe there's some possible targets or things like that. Wouldn't shock me, but we really don't know 100% for sure.
A lot of people have speculations, and this is all it is. And hopefully these speculations are wrong, but a lot of people believe that Biden is trying to exacerbate, well, let me not just put it all on Biden, but the Democratic Party, Biden's administration is trying to exacerbate some type of war to make things a lot more arduous for Trump when he takes office. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, he's definitely made a mess of a lot of things. And the Ukraine situation, yes, for some reason, they are wedded to this philosophy and not wanting to deviate from their Ukraine policy, which is basically just to throw a lot of money at Ukraine, keep urging Ukraine to attack, resist any attempts to try to settle the conflict, and impose all these sanctions on Russia. And supposedly all of this was going to weaken Russia, and Ukraine was going to be able to retake this territory, and the U.S. influence would. The reverse has happened. The reverse has happened. The Biden administration has expressed some significant vindictiveness, particularly prior to the election. Interestingly, after the election, there have been a few cases where there's at least been a political show, like he met with Trump and it's like, oh, hi Trump, how you doing? But, consider what they tried to do. And there's still some elements trying to do the thing. Yeah. They tried to put him in jail. Yeah. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to put in jail many people that were acquainted or associated with him. And they tried
to destroy his brand, his name, his family, essentially.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And they also tried to get him off the ballot. So they've tried hard to.
They also, with that, and I'm not trying to make it a direct attempt from the left, but the comparison to him, to certain Nazi
Sure.
leadership, almost got his head blown off.
So that kind of ties into what we're talking about. You know, I wanted to touch on your first element of your question related to the healthcare assault with the United CEO. So, yes, there's been a lot of hateful rhetoric. The MAGA people are threats to democracy. Trump is a threat to democracy. The Nazis, the Gestapo, he's going to seek retribution just like the Gestapo. You know, all this type of stuff. Well, they've also said some of the same things about the health insurance industry and the leaders of the health insurance industry. And their stuff that they're teaching in schools is kind of demonizing that industry and demonizing. There's a similarity in terms of demonizing individuals. And if you have an individual like this accused, Louis Mangiungi, I think his name is, and it seems like there's pretty strong evidence that he was the shooter, but I haven't independently examined the evidence. But assuming that he is, and his background comes from an Ivy League school, it is likely, I think there's some evidence that's coming out, that he was probably taught that the health insurance industry is denying all this coverage. Now, I used to work in the health insurance industry. I worked 8 years as a staff attorney for a local insurance company, health insurance company. And I also worked as a general counsel for a couple of years for a medical practice. The medical practice was local. It had 400 employees. We had a wide variety of medical specialties. We did diagnostic testing. We had primary care. We had various physical therapists. We had neurosurgeons. We had OBGYN. So it was a very varied specialty. So I had a lot of experience in this industry.
Okay.
I know a lot about it. I can tell you, most people do not understand the health insurance industry. Now, insurance companies generally aren't likely ever to be a great source of popular support, whether they're health insurance or property and casualty insurance, because there are some cases where the insurance company, denies somebody's claim and denies it improperly. People do have avenues to challenge those denials. For example, when I was an attorney for the health insurance company, we had a product, and other health insurance companies have the same type of product called Medicare Advantage. And basically, it's Medicare managed by a private health insurance company, and the private health insurance company is able to give a few extra benefits that Medicare does not. But sometimes there would be decisions on coverage, and the person wouldn't like the decision. Well, they had a right to a hearing sometimes to challenge it. I can remember a few. I think there was one case I remember having where somebody wanted a electric kind of scooter wheelchair.
Got it.
And Medicare covered a certain type of scooter that they would cover. But in this case, the individual wanted like this high-powered, super expensive, top-of-the-line, gold-plated. I'm giving a little bit of an example, but like all these little extra features they wanted to put on the scooter. And so Medicare said, well, we can't cover that. Okay, we only cover the base one. So the person was upset. So they challenged it, and I would appear on behalf of the health insurance company to argue the position. Now, what I would do is I would talk to, and many people don't understand this, but every major health insurance company actually has doctors and nurses employed as medical directors. And in many of these cases, these doctors are looking at the medical evidence, the x-rays, the diagnostic tests, to make a determination as to whether or not medically, but the treatment is medically necessary. But a lot of people don't understand all this stuff that goes on. They also have a mindset of they think they almost they should get something for nothing. Now, cost in health insurance can be affected by a variety of factors. It can be affected by if you're asking the insurance company to cover more and more things, they've got to allocate more resources. Hence, they need to increase the premiums to cover more items. If they have to...
3 minutes, Chris.
Sure. If they have to... sometimes, many people don't realize this either, but what is actually paid by the insurance companies to, say, a physician who performs a service, it's not the same payment to the physician for each service. It's based on the insurance sometimes. So if the person has Medicaid, the physician gets paid a very low amount. If the person has Medicare, the physician gets paid more than Medicaid. If the person doesn't have any insurance and the physician charges them privately, then that's even more expensive.
Premium, yeah.
Because what the physician is trying, sometimes the Medicaid payments in particular, are so low. I remember one case in particular, there was a physician who complained and said, hey, it's costing me more to do the surgery than you're paying me for it because of my overhead and all the things that I got to do.
Yeah. So is it a lot of times that they would take Medicaid or Medicare is because patients are being flooded towards them, so they get more patients?
There was a constant effort to try to recruit physicians to accept more Medicaid, particularly.
Okay.
Many physicians didn't want to do that because they were like, well, giving my example I just stated to you, they don't want to lose money, or they could make more money in other ways. So the system is very, very complicated, and many people don't realize that. Many people don't understand also all the avenues they have to challenge decisions. So if you get an unfavorable decision from a healthcare or health insurance company, first of all, depends on the type of insurance. If it's Medicare, you can request an administrative hearing where an administrative law judge hears the case. Typically, these hearings would be done by Zoom or over the phone, so you don't have to physically go to like a certain location. The person has some disability or whatever, they can all do it by phone. Very often there's just internal appeals. So, if somebody feels a particular health insurance company is not making the right decision, they usually get a couple administrative appeals within the health insurance company. They can ask for it to be reconsidered.
Now, in regards to Louis Mangiungi,
yes.
What do you think? I mean, and again, this is more speculating.
Right.
But what do you think inspired him? Let's say he did do it.
I think that political correctness, statements about how insurance, kind of similar demonization of individuals.
Same thing they did with Trump,
right.
essentially.
Right. Now, you always have to look at the facts. It may come as a controversial position to some woke individuals out there, but I actually believe the facts should determine our policies and our positions and what the evidence is. So every medical case, the nature of the evidence is critical. And it could be the case that a health insurance company is taking a unreasonable position. That does not mean that they do it always or often. Sometimes it's the case, and I remember a few of these cases, where the person, I remember another case, there was an individual who wanted some particular medication covered or particular services. The doctor they wanted the health insurance company to pay all this money to was charging like an exorbitant rate. And the doctor was obviously, for just purposes of giving a brief description, a quack doctor who didn't know what the heck he was doing. He had all types of medical citations by the state board in the state where he worked. I think he was actually removed from certain medical qualifications. But so you get people sometimes with unreasonable expectations. We had an individual convinced that this doctor was providing life-saving treatment when the medical evidence clearly showed that the person was being taken advantage of. And the medical opinions of the medical directors of the company I was working for were correct. The opinions were proper, the coverage determinations were proper, but the person was convinced that they were being screwed by the health insurance company. So a lot of people, they don't have the understanding. I don't think this guy Luigi knows diddly about how health insurance works. I think he knows very little about the systems, how their things are processed. You can also sue in court in many of these cases too. That wouldn't happen too often.
Yeah, but because that's a very stringent process, right?
But you could do it. I mean,
you could do it. But
we had some circumstances. It was but a lot of times these things would get resolved. Like, I would say most of the time when we had
it costs money to do so.
Well, no, I mean, they would get resolved internally through the person talking to the insurance company or the person's physician talking to the insurance company.
Okay.
So this Luigi is under, and others are very misplaced to assume that they're all these...
That anarchy was the necessary
Right. There's approach. So many things are done right, but nobody gets up and the newspapers don't say, hey, the health insurance companies process 99.8% of the claims properly, or they followed the process properly. They don't do that. By the way, I can tell you, having worked closely with the CEO of the health insurance company when I was there, this is another thing that's really misplaced about somebody like Luigi. They don't manage as a CEO, nor do they have time to be involved in every individual claim that gets processed. There are literally, in a year, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of claims that are processed. The CEO is not, to hold an individual like that responsible, and I think that Luigi wasn't even a member of United Healthcare.
Yeah.
So there's no
very interesting
particular, that's where I get to the facts. The facts have to determine.
Yeah.
This guy, actually, I've heard, was actually very sensitive to customer complaints. The company I worked for.
To my Brian Thompson.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That was the company I worked for was very sensitive to customer complaints, and would often, if there was a customer complaint about a particular, I would say most cases, 90% of them, sometimes they would either reverse the decision many times, sometimes the reason for the denial was the physician didn't submit enough medical evidence to support the operation or the surgery that they were proposing. So the medical directors would say, well, we want to see more evidence that this treatment is medically necessary, that it's not experimental. So they don't, to hold this guy individually accountable is, first of all, there's no specific case that they cited that's like, well, I got denied a $50,000 claim.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to the case. I want to see on trial what happens, what are the evidence that will come to light.
It sounds like from that the guy has made some admissions, this Luigi, that will likely be some significant evidence against him to show that he committed the crime.
Really?
Yes.
All right, well,
I think he wrote some type of a manifesto, as I understand it, where he, cited the evils of the health insurance industry and their deny. Again, it's not to say things couldn't be improved.
Correct.
One of the effects of Obamacare was the premiums went up and the deductibles became larger for many of the plans. So the deductible is the amount that you pay yourself before the insurance company will cover anything. So there are ways that things could be improved and reformed. That doesn't mean, this is totally out of bounds, obviously.
Yeah. I want to get your reaction to this and tell me what you think. This is a clip with Piers Morgan and Taylor Lawrence. And the thing is and the reason I want to show this is because there are a lot of people that feels like Taylor when it comes to this case with Louis Mangiungi assassinating Brian Thompson.
I'm just curious why your first reaction would be to his cold-blooded execution. And people wonder why we want these executives dead. And then you later commented when people were giving you a lot of blowback, I'm not alone, you said. Healthcare executive down with party balloons was on a next post that you commented on. Why would you be in such a celebratory mood about the execution of another human being? Aren't you supposed to be on the caring, sharing left where, you believe in the sanctity of life?
I do believe in the sanctity of life. And I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, because it feels like...
Serious?
I mean...
Joy in a man's execution?
Maybe not joy, but certainly not empathy. Because again...
We're watching the footage. How can this make you joyful? This guy's a husband, he's a father, and he's been gunned down in the middle of Manhattan. Why does that make you joyful?
Thousands of Americans that he murdered. So are the tens of thousands of Americans, innocent Americans, who died because greedy health insurance executives like this one push policies of denying care to the most vulnerable people. And the many millions of Americans that have watched people that I care about suffer and in some cases die because of lack of health care.
So should they all be killed then? Should they all be killed, these healthcare executives? Would that make you even more joyful?
No, that would not.
Well, why not?
And,
why are you laughing?
I think because it wouldn't fix the system.
You seem to find the whole thing hilarious.
I find your question funny.
A bloke's been murdered in the street. I don't find it funny at all.
I don't find it funny that tens of thousands of Americans die every year and because they are denied life-saving health care from people like the CEO. Now, I want to fix this system. You're right. We shouldn't be going around shooting each other with vigilante justice. No. I think that it is a good thing that this murder has led to America, or really the media elite.
Where there have been heinous crimes, and this was a heinous crime. This is a guy, as Piers pointed out, and this is what it's important for people to realize. This guy had a family. This guy had a wife. I've seen people who have, and I've been an attorney for 32 years, I've seen people who have lost a loved one because of a crime. Their lives are never the same. there's no sensitivity to what that individual family is experiencing. And as I was saying before, this guy who is a CEO, he doesn't review the vast majority of claims. And by the way, throughout history, when there have been heinous crimes, there's always somebody that usually comes up with some justification for it. Oh, they're and this is very much kind of like a Marxist looking at things. The ends justify the means. We got to get rid of these people. And, you know, it also shows, and Pierce points this out too, the hypocrisy of many on the left. The many on the left are lecturing people, we got to get rid of hate, right? How many times have we seen, hate has no home here? Mm-hmm. Well, looks like it's got a home there.
Right.
Yeah, and it's well entrenched.
Correct. They say that, but they support abortion, they support wars, and now they're supporting things like this. The problem I have also, and this is extremely convoluted within its nature, because when you look at someone like Brian Thompson and Luigi Mangiungi came from a wealthy family. Brian Thompson didn't. He went to a state school. He worked his way up. He started off as an accountant. He worked his way up all the way to CEO. That is a part of the American dream. To start from the bottom and work your way up to the top. He's a man, he's a father, he's a husband. He's taking care of his family and his people. And then you go on national television and then say, I feel joy for his assassination.
Right.
I don't get these people.
Well, it's not a rational, it's a, you know, and also too, this lady has no idea how many, you know, she has tens of thousands of people are dying. Yeah. Like I was saying, my experience has been, and I've been immersed in the industry. I know how it works. I spent 8 years working with the health insurance company, and a variety of problems. I also saw it from the side of the physicians and the medical practice. So I understand, and most people have no clue how these things operate. You know, they kind of look at it just like, and as I said, there are many avenues that people have to seek redress if they think that their claim has been, you know, and there have been court cases where the health insurance company has lost the cases. But as I said, most of the time it doesn't even get anywhere close to that. Right. Many of the times it gets, as I said, it gets either reversed, resolved, or the person has an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, after this interview, she actually got fired from Vox Media.
Huh.
Yeah, that's where she worked, Vox Media. So good for you.
Well, good, because you know, there were people like when Trump was, there was an attempted assassinations, that they were, oh, too bad the bullet didn't hit him. You know, they were the same kind of mindset. Mm-hmm. There were people, I remember when George Bush was the president, somebody was like, oh, I hope somebody assassinates him, you know. And these are the people that are trying to say they're for love. Mm-hmm. Well, only if you agree with them, apparently.
Well, let's move on to the nefarious leader of the left himself, Joe Biden, and his mostly egregious
well, there's a question if he's really in charge of anything.
Sure. Yeah, that's hypothetically,
right?
Joe Biden, pardon Hunter Biden, his son. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm not surprised. I was expecting it.
Well, let me put in the claim after he claimed multiple times, right, and his press secretary, that he would not interfere,
right,
and that he would not pardon his son multiple times. How do you feel?
Well, I'm not surprised. And what's probably not being focused on enough, there are a few people focused on it, is the nature and overbroad nature of the pardon. This wasn't like the Biden saying, okay, Hunter, I know you have a gun charge and a tax evasion charge, you are pardoned from those charges. Those current court cases, you have nothing to fear. I'm giving you a pardon in those. He didn't do that. He didn't limit it to that. He said, anything, I'm pardoning you from those things, and anything from 2014 to the present. Now, why 2014? Okay, why do we pick 2014? Pretty interesting. Well, interestingly, that just happened to be the time that Hunter joined the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company in Ukraine, and was getting paid like $85,000 a month for supposed expertise in the energy field in Ukraine. Obviously, this was a attempt by Burisma, and Joe Biden was the vice president of the United States at the time, with Barack Obama being the president. This was an attempt by Burisma to get some influence with the United States government. And they figured, well, if we have Hunter on the board as the vice president's son, we're going to be protected from any type of inquiries. And at the time, there was actually in this 2014 period, there was a Ukrainian prosecutor that was trying to investigate Burisma. And very uncomfortable for Burisma and probably the Bidens that this investigator was poking around, this prosecutor, in the practices of the company. There's a lot of corruption in Ukraine.
I bet.
There's a lot of circumstances where there are payoffs, things of that nature. And really, I think one of the main purposes of the pardon was you can't, Congress, in a Trump administration, you can't Trump invest. They want to preclude poking in to that history. And there's also, so the pardon was not just for Hunter in essence, although it's stated for Hunter. In essence, I think it was largely to protect Joe Biden,
for sure.
because
For sure.
there have been multiple cases where, and the New York Post first ran the story prior to the 2020 election, but many of the news sources suppressed the story, and the tech media suppressed it on Hunter Biden's laptop. If you recall, there was a laptop that was in the possession of the FBI since 2019.
Wasn't it 3 laptops though, right? How what a damage that he brought in to get fixed.
I don't remember the number, but it was discovered. Hunter left it behind with a shop and didn't pick it up.
Yeah.
And when the person from the shop was in the process of reviewing and repairing it, found a bunch of information that not only showed Hunter's crack addiction, various tapes with sexual nature.
With his brother's wife, the widow, right? Because his brother had passed away, and he went to have sex with the wife. And then he also had introduced her to cocaine.
So I haven't watched the tapes myself.
I've looked into it a little bit, but yeah,
but yes,
happened.
But other things that were on there too was information that suggested that there was this influencing peddling operation where the Bidens, with Hunter kind of being intermediary in this, getting some money from like the mayor of Moscow, some individuals in Kazakhstan, some individuals in Ukraine. I think there were a few other, China, there was a Chinese company getting some money via an indirect route from the Chinese Communist Party. And then there were these references on the laptop to a percentage of the money collected going to somebody that was called the Big. Now there's a guy that was an acquaintance of Hunter's Tony Bobulinski, who gave some interviews with Tucker Carlson, and in those interviews, he stated the big guy is Joe Biden. And he said he met Joe Biden a few times. And he witnessed certain things. And so there was like a percentage given to the big guy. So the news media suppressed this. If you remember, Anthony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, actually went to the theatrics, I call them theatrics because it was phony, of getting 51 intelligence officials to sign a letter saying that any information or story about the Hunter Biden laptop was likely Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
And some of these people that signed this letter are regular, they appear regularly on CNN. They appear regularly on CNN. They make comments. They knew the thing was authentic, but they signed the letter anyway. Probably told, hey, you want to be in our administration. You're going to have to sign this thing. And it was all done so that in a debate with Trump and Biden could introduce this letter and say, Trump.
Yeah, these are one of the things or reasons why Elon Musk bought Twitter, because even in the New York Post, they were putting out information about the Hunter Biden and it got suppressed, and they actually got kicked off of Twitter because of it.
Right, that's correct. I remember, yes, correct. And it was all designed so that the story wouldn't get out before the 2020 election. Now, there's actually, I think, a Pew Research poll done after the election that suggested like 17% of the people who voted for Biden would have changed their vote if they had known about the Hunter Biden laptop story. The point being, all this background information, they don't want any type of Trump administration, Department of Justice, or Congress. They want to try to do whatever they can, by they being the Bidens, to preclude looking into this. And by pardoning Hunter, going back to 2014, Hunter knows he can't be prosecuted for anything that he did with any of those influencing peddling operations. So if he failed to register as a foreign lobbyist properly, if he didn't report income relating to those things, he won't have to, he has no incentive to, he's kind of free and clear. So if Congress wanted him to testify regarding any of those events, he could refuse to testify, probably arguably without being punished, because he could say, well, I've been pardoned for all those things.
Right, yeah.
You can't make me testify in something I've been pardoned for.
Yeah, and the thing
or then they would make him look like a victim too. You're just trying,
yeah.
You're going after him
Yeah.
because he's the president's son.
Yeah.
They want to cover that up.
They keep making him seem like he's just this kid.
Right.
He's 50 years old.
Right, because they don't want to talk about the influence peddling. They want to talk about the money from the mayor of Moscow's wife, $3.5 million.
Yeah.
Why is that payment being made?
Right.
They don't want to talk about why Hunter got $85,000 a month as a member. Hunter has had a history of crack addiction. And there's no reason an energy company would want a guy with no energy experience with a crack addiction on their board.
Who wants a crackhead on their board?
Other than it's an influence thing.
Correct.
They're like,
Yeah.
and I was going to say, there was the Ukrainian prosecutor that was prosecuting Burisma, and at the time, the U.S. was on the verge of deciding whether or not to approve like a big loan to Ukraine. And Joe Biden, and there's actually a videotape of him not only saying, but bragging that he got the prosecutor who was prosecuting his son in Burisma fired. He said, I told that prosecutor that if he didn't I told the Ukrainian officials that we were negotiating with regarding the loan, that if they didn't get that prosecutor fired, they weren't going to get the loan. And then Joe Biden said in this video, he said, and son of a gun, within like a half a day, the prosecutor was fired and the investigation was effectively shut down. Now, interestingly, I think the first Trump impeachment was designed in part to cover up this series of facts too. Accuse the other opponent of doing what you are actually doing. Mm-hmm. They said, well, Trump, he tried to halt the Ukrainian aid. Well, he did try to delay it, but he was like asking questions about like, where's this going? What are they doing? And he did ultimately approve the aid. So the whole impeachment thing was ridiculous. Right. But it was also designed to get you and the public to think Trump was the one that's guilty on Ukraine, not Joe Biden, not the Bidens. And they wanted the focus off of that. So this is just another attempt to get the focus, and which underscores the importance to me, of the First Amendment and why the public needs to be made aware of these things, why we shouldn't be censoring speech. We should be very, 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 very reluctant to do that. It was a core founding principle of this country. First Amendment is the First Amendment because it's considered the most important and necessary for the protection of a free society. And all too often, people on the left want to censor that information. Yeah. Or they give out, like in the case of this individual that experienced joy, they are always saying, well,
Taylor Lawrence.
They say, we want to control disinformation, right? Well, they're giving out a lot of disinformation. How about explaining the process?
Yeah. And weren't they talking about, like, we got to justify what's a hate crime?
Right.
What's a hate speech?
Right.
Like that would be classified as a hate speech right there.
Right.
Okay, let's jump on to the next topic and
then
we'll wrap up from there. In conjunction to Biden and his pardons, I think it was like 1,500 pardons he has given out thus far. Right. He also gave clemency to the judge in Pennsylvania. This judge was putting kids into prison and receiving kickback for it. I think over $2.8 million he received. He got sentenced for 17 years.
So yes, I've heard about this.
Yeah.
So it reminded me, and I don't know all the particulars, but I would not be shocked if there was some type of political donation made by this guy to some either entity that the Bidens have or run. There's a reason why this happened. And I don't think the reason is that the guy is a reformed individual that is truly repentant for his. Yeah, if you were there years ago when Bill Clinton was the president, at the end of his presidency, he basically, and it was a scandal, the last term of the last couple months of his term, basically. If you wanted a pardon, I hate to say this, and I'm laughing, but it's not really a funny subject, you could buy a pardon. If you and there was a lady, I think her name was Denise Rich, who wanted her husband pardoned, and there was some video of her like going into the White House, and she made like $1 million donation to some foundation the Clintons were running, and then mysteriously, her husband ended up getting pardoned.
Interesting.
So it was like a cash for pardons. It wouldn't shock me if at some later date we discover that something like this has gone on, that there was some type of remunerary or financial kickback related to it. I don't know that independently, but it wouldn't shock me. But it also, somebody like that, and again, you have to look at the facts of a particular case. Correct. But on its face, it is certainly somebody that should A, no longer be a judge, B, they should be disbarred, and C, there should be some criminal
The
prosecution.
The problem with this case is that a lot of lives were affected by this. Right. There was actually a kid, his name by the name of Edward, who was sentenced. I think it was like 18 months to prison or 8 months to prison. Afterwards, he committed suicide. He was only in high school.
So in some of our previous podcasts, one of the things I've talked about is the importance of fair trials and fair process. And you have to have unbiased judges, juries, prosecutions that are properly and fairly conducted in accordance with the law, because otherwise the system will reach unfair and terrible results. And I don't know how this particular, that is, people's lives are affected. If you're charged, I've done some criminal defense work. If somebody's charged with a crime, there were a few cases, actually I had, where the person was totally innocent. Most of the time they weren't. But it wasn't always a black or white question of whether they were guilty or not. It was kind of like what level of guilt or what level of punishment you ascribe to it. But if you're totally innocent, you shouldn't be charged. You shouldn't be, convicted, let alone, punished for that.
Yeah. So I'll read this real quick. So it was 8 months. Edward Kenzakowski took his own life after he spent 8 months in juvenile detention. Cavarella ordered children as young as 8 years old to detention. Many of them first-time offenders deemed delinquent or for petty theft, jaywalking, truancy, smoking on school grounds, and other minor infractions. Cavarella were ordered to pay more than $200 million. Okay,
but I guarantee you,
victims.
Well, I guarantee you, when they order to pay all this money, probably a lot of the money has been spent, and the victims are probably not getting the money.
Yeah.
Because I remember a case I had. There was one time, it was a lawyer. I represented the estate, and it was individuals that got fleeced by a lawyer, who they put the money for the estate in the lawyer's trust account, and there are very specific rules of what an attorney can have client funds in their trust account, but they have to account for the money. They have to, they can't just keep the money, okay? Mm-hmm. If it's the client's money, you have to turn it over to the client. Now they can take out their fee and a percentage for expenses and things like that, but so in that case, that I have, the lawyer that I was describing, the lawyer just, took the client's money, and I think they spent it on like gambling or something like that. So they didn't have any money. So yeah, the persons had a right to collect like, couple $100,000 from the attorney, but guess what? There wasn't any money to collect from. So I wouldn't be shocked if these people were ordered, that the victims probably have not received, I suspect, maybe they've gotten some, but maybe not. I'd be surprised if they've gotten all of the money. It shows you how outrageous these things are. And this is something that definitely should be investigated. And there should be an investigation that looks into this. There was an investigation done into the Clinton pardons, and that's where some of these things were uncovered. Like, I think it was, the lady's name was Denise Rich. There's a video of her going in, and I think it was $1 million check, and then all of a sudden, the pardon happened. I think the guy's name was Mark Rich.
Mark Rich. Children as young as 8 years old.
So this is why talk a lot about the importance of fair trials and not just assuming that everything, the founding fathers were the reason they have the 10 amendments, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment protecting you against unreasonable searches and seizures, the Fifth Amendment that you have a right against self-incrimination, the Sixth Amendment, you have right to counsel. They experienced what they were perceived to be abuses by the British, where the judges and in that era didn't always provide those protections to people. And obviously there should be in my view, a congressional investigation looking into this case in particular and get it out in the open and let the public see and find out why was this done? Why did they pick this guy? Ask for emails, ask for text messages, documentary evidence. There's a reason. And it wouldn't shock me, too, with the Bidens, if there was some financial donation. Don't know it at this time, but it looks awfully suspicious.
Well, this won't be the first time that Joe Biden has been involved in something nefarious like this.
That's correct.
Didn't he pass certain bills that he put people in prison and he received some type of kickback for it as well?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I know he's had a history himself of, excuse me, he's had a history of plagiarism.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I think he had an issue when he was in law school.
He has some connections to this location in regards to PA as well.
So there you go. As I was saying, there's some reason here, and it's not likely a good ethical reason. It's not like, where a pardon might be appropriate, of course, is if the person is unfairly charged.
Correct.
Or maybe their sentence is too heavy, or maybe they've exhibited behavior to show certain remorse or repentance, or they've been a model prisoner or whatever, where maybe you can commute the sentence. But it was not designed to be a circumstance where you like with the Clintons, you basically can buy a pardon. You want a pardon, you say, you know what, as long as you donate to my foundation, you'll get what you want.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because
it's corruption.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's a problem.
Corruption.
Is that people put so much emphasis on our government, but then our government, stuff like this happens in the government, and then people lose faith in it.
So the media is also partly, if not significantly, to blame for a lot of things, because they, for example, in the case of the Hunter Biden laptop, other than the New York Post, most of the media was trying to hide the story.
Correct, yeah.
We need to know these facts. If it's a Republican or if it's a Democrat or independent, whatever this, we need to know the truth. They should be telling us the truth about the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
They should be telling us the truth. Give people an education on health insurance.
Yeah, because what it does is it holds people accountable, and it limits certain.
Well, and it also
like this.
It also might help. It also might help alleviate tensions and things like that if you're telling people the truth on certain things.
Yeah, for sure.
Or in terms of the media, sometimes I think also tries to unfortunately inflame racial tensions too.
Yeah, they exacerbate a lot of things that don't need
that's
to be
not
exacerbated.
helpful.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, but in regards to if the media did their job, I look at it like two arms, right? If you have one that just holds another one accountable, then things will go accordingly.
Right.
So if the government knew that if we do any little thing, it would be highlighted and then shown to everybody, it would limit them from doing certain egregious acts, right? So things like this wouldn't go on because if one hint of it goes out and we contact the media and they come and investigate and we're done. But the problem is that the media is bought and paid for, so that way now the government doesn't, well, certain people within the government, the confines of the government, don't need to act accordingly because there's nobody there to hold them accountable.
Right. The media becomes like an ad agency.
Correct.
Looking to kind of sell you on what the narrative is that they want to push.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, I remember listening to a podcast of RFK Jr. when he was on, I think, with Judge Andrew Napolitano. It was a podcast. I was listening to it. I don't always agree with everything Judge Napolitano says, but RFK Jr. was on this podcast and he made a comment. He said, the federal government needs to get back in the business of telling people the truth. Mm-hmm. And I think he couldn't be more right. And then, by the way, there should be truth about
knowing when that was
the JFK, whatever remains of the JFK files. Yeah. Let's show them to people. Yeah, there's probably some embarrassing things that the CIA did that they don't want. Well, you know what? It's time that we tell people the truth about those things. Yeah. Let's let's not hide these corruption things. Let's look into this case with the judges here. Yeah. Let's tell let's not everything is not about race. We talk about the Daniel. I don't know if you want to talk about the Daniel Penny case.
Penny, yeah.
That
you can talk about that later.
Well,
you can bring it.
Yeah, that you have to look at the facts of the case. And it could be that the facts of a given case do show that there's some racial animus, but it depends on the facts, depends what the witnesses say that were there. In that case, there were actually witnesses that were African American that were testifying on Penny's behalf.
Yeah, so let's divulge in this a little bit.
Right.
I'm with this case, I'm kind of split. I am. And here's why I'm split. You mentioned the First Amendment, freedom of speech.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out at what point did, what's his name? Neely?
Neely, yes.
What point did Jordan Neely become a threat other than saying, I'm going to hurt people?
So, again, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you what actually happened. I don't know, other than what I hear witnesses say and what a jury concluded. By the way, what a jury concluded several times, apparently. So I have to assume that the jury heard the testimony of the people that were there, heard what their thoughts were, what they thought happened. There was apparently this, and it's a tragic outcome. We don't want that to happen.
Correct.
And there's also, in any criminal case, and this was a criminal case, which is important for people to realize, there has to be something in order for there to be a conviction. It's called mens rea, the Latin term for kind of like the state of mind. You have to have an intention to commit a crime or be so grossly reckless. It could be the case, again, I'm not there, I'm just saying this is one possible thing that might happen, that this gentleman was threatening people. Allegedly, this Penny put the guy in a hold, that was all he was trying to do, and not trying to, so there wasn't like a necessarily, there could be an argument, he didn't have the criminal intent to kill the person, he was just trying to, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's now that's one of the...
There has been no claims thus far that stated that, well, the case is over, right?
Right.
But the moral of it is, what's bothering me is because there was no attempt, right?
Well, I don't know. The guy, I think, had a history. I think the other
has had a history of
the other thing, and this is where I said the mens rea, the state of mind, is important for a criminal conviction. There have been, I think, other circumstances of people being attacked in the subway cars. And so I'm sure there were people there that maybe or either had heard of others who were attacked or were aware. Now, I remember this was an experience I had when I went to New York City once, and my brother lived in Queens at the time. His first job was in Queens. One of my brothers lived in Queens. And I kind of got a little big city education from him that I wasn't entirely aware of. And one of the things I remember, went into the subway, and I'm looking down the tunnel to see if the subway car is approaching. My brother grabs me. He goes, "Don't do that." He goes, "There are people that have been pushed into the subway." So, and I think I remember reading there've been like, that happens periodically. Somebody just, whatever their problem is, viciously or whatever, they push sometimes people onto the subway. I don't think these subways are, particularly with some of the kind of the more lawless aspects that have been permitted by the New York rules and governor with bail reform and things. I don't think these areas are safe as they could be. And that also contributes to the likelihood of something tragic like this potentially happening. So I think the first thing to think about is there can be criminal liability, there can also be civil liability. There are different standards. And like you might have seen this reflected in the OJ case. OJ had a criminal trial. He was acquitted at the criminal trial. At the civil trial, however, with the same subject matter, there's a lesser standard of proof required, and he was found liable and ordered to pay, I think it was like $33 million or something to the Goldmans, but he never paid any of that or not much of it, because he had much of his wealth tied up in exempt assets that were exempt from seizure from a money judgment. But so, again, the facts determine what happened. I wasn't there. There were people that said that they were grateful to this penny. But one of the elements that I was, in terms of making the general point I was going to make, was even if this guy overreacted, if one assumes that, I don't think there's really any evidence that's been presented in a convincing way that says, well, he did that because the guy was an African American, that he didn't like African Americans or things. And that's what I think some parties have tried to make the case about.
Yeah, so Black Lives Matter came out of nowhere.
Right. So again, the evidence doesn't support that narrative. We don't just push the narrative. The facts, we can't take the position, the facts, let's not let the facts interfere with our beliefs.
Yeah.
That's why the facts determine. And it could be the case.
I never took it like a racial crime, because there were black people on the train trying to restrain him as well.
Well, right, that's correct. That's correct. So in this case, I don't think there's any evidence of it being a racial issue.
I didn't take it as a racial.
Now, we do have some of those that happen. We saw that locally here with the Tops shooting. Clearly, that was racially motivated. Clearly, the facts in that case show that was the animus. And that person, now, tragically, that was very tragic. The guard at that location, I think, actually got some shots off at the killer, and I think he actually hit the killer. The killer had gone to such elaborate lengths and had gotten like a Kevlar vest, so that the security guard, I believe, was killed. There was my children's mother knew somebody that was at that store when the shooting happened and a bullet had grazed the friend's head. It was just lucky that this person wasn't killed, but there were people that were killed. So it does happen. It does happen, and we have to look at the facts and to make the determination accordingly. Doesn't mean we start a riot just because, we have a preconceived narrative that we want to push, and that's where I have an issue with some of the parties that want to go in that direction.
Yeah, they were calling for, the Black Lives Matter were calling
Right.
for black vigilantes to step up.
Right.
Yeah, just appalling. Okay, Chris, thank you so much, my man.
Sure.
I appreciate
Very
you. It's
welcome.
always a pleasure talking to you.
Same here.
Look forward to the next time.
All right.
Until then, Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you. Merry Christmas too. Thank you. Bye.